Hello and a very warm welcome to our Conversations in Design session. I'm Claire German, Managing Director of the Design Centre. In this exciting format, we're keeping our community engaged and inspired wherever they are. We're bringing together designers, industry insiders and media hosts for some great conversations online. So now to our speakers. By the power of technology, I'm delighted to introduce a thoroughly creative panel from London and Paris. Rose Murray, founder of These White Walls, Tiffany Duggan, founder of Studio Duggan, and Sophie Dries, founder of Sophie Dries Architect. We're in for a treat as we're going to explore their secrets in creating some magical and memorable spaces. This promises to be a really fascinating session, so who better to chair it than author and creative director Emilio Pimentel-Reid. So over to you, Emilio, and thank you all for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Hello, I'm Emilio Pimentel-Reid, author of new book, Bold British Design, and co-founder of brand consultancy Interiors Academy. Today, I am thrilled to be in conversation with our super panel of next generation designers. Sophie Dries is an architect and designer with studios in both Paris and Milan, lucky her. She works on high-end interiors, residential, commercial, and hotels across Europe and Australia. Sophie is represented by collectible design galleries such as Nilufar in Milan, Giustini Staggetti in Rome, and Leclerc in LA. Tiffany Duggan is founder and director of Studio Duggan, a leading British design practice. Having initially gained experience painting theater and film sets while studying scenic design, Tiffany now conjures fun, livable, and dynamic spaces, skillfully blending influences from different eras. Studio Duggan has gained an international reputation and is listed in British House and Gardens top 100 designers. Rose Murray founded the practice These White Walls in 2017. The multi-award winning, luxury-led, and concept-driven design studio creates boldly elegant and beautifully crafted interiors for the high-end hospitality and residential sectors. Her multidisciplinary background began when she turned an internship at Vogue into a role styling editorials and television sets for the BBC. Her vanguard spirit led her into the world of immersive events, designing luxury dining spaces and performative venues for a more radically minded corporate clientele. That's the kind of clientele we all want. So, guys, welcome. It's such a nice, it's so nice to have you. So I'm gonna start with Sophie. Sophie, how did you start in the interiors world, and how are materials important in your work?
Thank you for asking me. Actually, I studied architecture, so I graduated as an architect from the Paris school Malaquais in the Beaux-Arts. During my studies, I went to do a master in Helsinki, in Finland, in furniture, and this is actually where the interiors and the furniture scale came from. After working few years for Paris offices like Pierre Jovanovic or Christian Liègre, I decided to run my own practice 6 years ago, and I opened the Milan office 4 years ago. So actually, it's now Paris and Milan.
And how do materials come into your work?
So materials are extremely important because let's say my style, my design is quite minimal. The lines are quite straight and pure. So I want to create a contrast with the materials, the texture. I always work with strong textures or strong patterns. And actually in my furniture, as I work a lot with craft and local craftsmanship, I always try to experiment new materials and to transform them. It can be ceramics, it can be wood, it can be glass, rugs, marble. I always try to push the material further.
And talking about glass, what are you doing in Murano?
Okay, so I have the chance to work in Murano, mainly for the lighting collection that I do with Nilufar Gallery in Milan. And there we experiment to include minerals in glass. So it's hand-blown glass, but we put some minerals inside that creates sort of a patterny, magical effect within light.
How amazing. And Rose, how would you define your studio's style, or if there is one, or narrative?
That's a good question. I would say that we're not necessarily defined by a particular style, but definitely by a particular process. And that's something that we bring to every single project, which is generally based around the three pillars, which include narrative, that you mentioned. So narrative is one, materials is the other, and artistry is the next one. So the narrative is in some sense a story, but more about the client themselves and the transformation that we want them to achieve. So who are they at the beginning of the process, and then who will they become? And then with that, we go to materials, and I sort of very much feel that materials, have values that represent those stories that we want to tell within the space. And so, in order to articulate that story, the materials are really, really important for grounding that into, the reality of the space. And then also with that, we have the artistry, and that can be anything from the craftsmanship to perhaps the art collection that a private client might have, or, very, very particularly working with artists themselves. So collaborating with artists and offering them spaces within the architecture of the interior to create something. And for an example, at Hyde, we worked with 3 female artists. I placed one on each floor and gave them each a sort of curatorial cue of Hyde is hidden, and can you expose something surprising within the interior? And it was a lovely opportunity to give each of them their own narrative within the wider concept to create something original. So yeah, that's basically how we approach consistently, but it often turns out differently each time.
Rose, and does the art come at the beginning of the project or at the end, or in the middle?
Or in the middle. Yeah, I think it's often in that order, but they come very, very quickly, and it definitely comes very close to the beginning, and often can be part of that narrative, that, the definition. Sometimes that first meeting with the clients, the values that they're expressing, you know that there's an artist there that you've seen, and that there's an opportunity there. We rarely end up trying to fill a space with an art. It's definitely woven into the concept from the beginning.
Huh. So it's part of the visual conversation and the creativity of the project from the beginning. Very, very interesting. Tiffany, what do your clients most like about the very individual spaces you design for them?
I think that it's the fact that even though our approach and our process is the same from project to project, the way we actually, from a design perspective, approach each one is very different, and it's very much based on the client and also the house and the locality. And I think everything that we do is very bespoke. Not that every piece of furniture that goes in is bespoke, but every design is very much individual, and it's filled with sort of ideas that represent the client's personality. So I think what we sort of really try and achieve with each project is that we create something that obviously we're proud of and that we've designed, but is something that our clients and often families in our case will move into and really love living in, because their houses should be extensions of their personality and who they are, and cater for the life that they lead practically, whilst being kind of inspirational, enjoyable places to be in. And I think we've definitely noticed over the years that different people have got such different ideas about what they want from home. Some want them to feel light and bright color, some love like dark, moody, cocooning spaces, others have sort of very specific requirements, especially at home at the moment, sort of working from home, or children, or all sorts of different sort of practical requirements, in addition to kind of how we actually want our homes to feel, and how we want them to make us feel.
And how do you draw out those desires, wishes that the clients have, so that they end up with something so special and bespoke?
So I think sometimes it's really easy, and some clients have been thinking about this for years, and they come and they have like lots of photos saved, or ideas, or samples, and lots of references, and in those instances it's often more a case of actually kind of like taking away and kind of like curating what's the real kind of heart of everything that they're showing us and that they love, and then tap to tap saying that, you know, this is a west facing room, or how about, you know, thinking about other sort of considerations as well. But then we have some clients that come and really find it quite hard, as I do actually, to sort of articulate with words design, and you know, it's such a visual process, and I think in those instances where someone might be finding it a bit difficult, or might not have had the time to sort of, you know, really collate a brief for us, we will save lots of images ready to show them. We'll put together lots of samples. In fact, the first meeting we have is basically just showing huge amounts of reference imagery, samples, materials, colors, and just saying, don't think about where it's going, just what do you like, what don't you like what's your first reaction to everything.
I love how you find the design heart. That is something I haven't heard before, and that's a really good way of putting it. So in addition to heart, amazing interiors have craftsmanship and all sorts of beautiful elements. Rose, how is craftsmanship important in your design work? Those who know Rose's work may have seen some of the spectacular interiors that she's created, but tell us about how craftsmanship forms part of your vision.
I mean, I think craftsmanship is totally vital. I mean, without the craftsmen who turn it into reality, it's just something that we're imagining. So yeah, I think they are the real facilitators. They really make the vision real, and so it's a thrilling process, really. And often you know, I'm challenging them, but also I sometimes don't even know how something's going to be made. We just have an idea, and I'll go to some of the guys who I work with, and then the women who they can see a technique that they're using, and I'm like, well, how do we innovate with this? And I think we really love to champion the traditional techniques, which I think are becoming quite rare in many places. And I think the way to do that is to look at how we can innovate and use those techniques in a new and interesting way to create new objects and materials, and that's really thrilling, and it's quite an investigative process as well, and yeah, I think that's the joy of being quite a bespoke studio, and you know, testing those boundaries and seeing what comes up. But
shortly, shortly we're going to be seeing one of your interiors at Hyde, and there's a spectacular staircase. So
yeah.
If you could tell us, how did that come together? Because that looked like it took a lot of technical prowess and thought, you know, as well as craft skills.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, that began on the outside of the building as a very sort of square staircase, and then, you know, from the planning side with Lustre Green, we turned it into a spiral at the centre. And then that was, you know, technically and beautifully visioned by Atmos Studio, who then, you know, managed to get it down to a sort of finite form. And then that was taken to Poland, and it took, I don't know, something like 9 months to just be made, and literally by hand. The guys were on site for weeks finishing it off by hand. It was quite a process, and yeah, and it's such a spectacular center piece within the space. But then as your eye drifts around and you go into all the details, I mean, there's just the number of people we have to thank in that space is really astounding, and the number of hands that really helped to articulate it was yeah, quite wonderful. So yeah, it's a space you can keep on seeing things every time you go.
And it's great to see a space that has pushed craft in a very modern, fun, and contemporary way. Talking about interiors, influential interiors. Sophie, you know, you're between Milan and Paris. You're very curious. You travel a lot. Are there any interiors that have particularly influenced you and your point of view as an architect and designer?
Definitely, as a Paris architect, I've been really influenced by the masters of the Art Deco and the modern movement, like Robert Mallet-Stevens has done incredible houses for the Noailles or for the important families between the 20s and the 30s, as well as Jean-Michel Franck, also an Art Deco master. But living in Italy, I really could discover more about one of my favorite architects, Carlo Scarpa. As well as living in Finland, I explored a lot of Alvar Aalto houses, and what they have in common, they are all architects, but their interiors are very refined. And at the time, there was no sort of boundaries or labels. Are you an architect? Are you an interior designer? Are you a furniture designer? They were actually designing the building, but as well as the door handles or the rugs. They were doing sort of complete works. And this is how I see as well my practice.
So you see yourself bringing together the architecture and the different elements of the space.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't see any boundaries between doing a table, some vessels, or actually designing a 8,000 square meter hotel. No, it's really, for me, it's just a change of scale, but not, it's the same skills.
And Tiffany, let's talk about a different element of an interior, color, and also the mixing of eras. How do you combine colors and mix different elements from different periods to create such cohesive and fun and exciting spaces?
Well, I think it starts with the sort of process I was explaining before, which is what we call our design analysis process. So I think that gives us a really good gauge on kind of what the client's boundaries are. So I mean, most of what we do is all about some sort of mix and some sort of contrast, but finding out sort of how far is going to make some people feel comfortable versus others is kind of part of that initial process. And then sort of in response to that, we put together mood boards for each of the key spaces. And those mood boards are really helpful to me. I mean, I've tried sort of to do personal projects in the past without them, thinking, oh, I don't need a mood board for myself. But, it's just really grounds you and gives you a much better sort of focus moving forward. So I think the beginnings of how we should go about mixing furniture items and old and new and ideas and colors all stem from that initial mood board or concept, as we call it. And I think it's really important for us to do those concepts, both to give the room itself a focus, but also to make sure that a whole house feels cohesive. And are you walking into the hallway, which is, perhaps a dark, moody space, and then we want it to open up as we walk through the rest of the house? Or is it the opposite? Have we got too much color? Is it fighting? So it kind of sets the tone at the beginning. And then we just do a lot of playing around as we're sourcing. So, we put together everything on a page. We might feel it's getting a bit fussy. We need to draw it back a bit. We love to use mid-century pieces and design. I think one of the images is of an amazing kind of like Sputnik light and a Togo sofa, which was really fun. And that was actually in quite a traditional Victorian house, where we had the challenge of having quite a traditional, typical sort of formal reception room set up at the front of the house, and then a really contemporary extension at the back. And that room sort of bridged the gap between those spaces. So we needed to find products that offered different elements. And yeah, when it comes to color, I think again starts on that kind of mood board phase, and then sort of we do a lot of sampling. We have a look on site, and it all starts to come together.
So the mood board helps you edit what works, what doesn't work, take that back to the client's vision, and keep things moving. I think this is a good moment to show some photographs of our designer's work. And then once we've seen some of the pictures, then we can get into a process. So this is a flower shop that Sophie designed in Paris, and where you can see that she's referenced a grotto with wonderful light. And then the next image is a living room in the Ile Saint-Louis, very edited, very considered. And then if we move on to the next image, which is the action all happening in Murano, where Sophie creates her glassware. And this is one of Rosa's projects, L'Orto. What wonderful moody color. And you can see all of the materials that she combines so well and so comfortably. And then we move on to the spectacular staircase at Hyde. And you can see there's so much energy, Rose, and as well as looking back at craft and tradition. And then finally we'll see one of the garden rooms.
So cool. I love that room.
Yeah, I want to jump into that bed. It's fabulous.
Yeah, it's like you always like, I want that one. No, I want that one. No, I want that one.
And then we move on to the white room that Tiffany mentioned. And this is how Tiffany does Victorian.
Oh, love it.
And then the next page, this must have been quite a fabulous mood board, because this is Tiffany Country House bathroom. And then moving on to very fun Kensington living room. Look at all the details. I love the chandelier with the leaves.
I love that. We actually we had something not too dissimilar on our concept board from the beginning. Not the same sort of piece. It was I think it was a floor lamp, but it was a similar vibe. And actually our clients found a pair. He was an antiques dealer, and you know, he said he wanted to show us some things that he had found, and I'd found some lights which I loved, and then he showed us these and we were like, no, it's good, they're perfect, go for it.
There they are. Yes.
That must have been a nerve-wracking moment, you know, like,
yeah, I know, sort of a
like,
holding breath.
No,
it turned out well.
Well, I do like a bold moment, and we continue our pictures. And this is just this is a cover of my book, Bold British Design, which is from Quadrille and available via Potterton Books at the Design Center. So when you are there, shopping and touching things again, do pop into Potterton and check out Bold British Design. But going back to our designers, I want to open this question to all of you. What is the secret behind your creative process when designing a space? Who wants to start?
Go on, Sophie.
You smiled. Yeah, go, Sophie.
Yeah, actually, I agree both with what Tiffany and Rose said previously. There are key elements, definitely where we are, like what is the space? Is it an old house? Is it a contemporary loft? Is it a countryside mansion? So definitely we have to respect the spirit of the existing space, and also who are the owners, who is going to live there and what's going to happen there. And then comes the face, as Tiffany described it super precisely, of the mood boards that are extremely important to communicate with our clients, because at the beginning we don't know so well each other, so it's sort of the common language where we can exchange, and this face of mood boards or materials. I always have like materials next to me to show them stuff, to really understand what they feel about it, and it's the starting point. Yeah,
it's all sort of, I think it's all like foundational layers. I don't know how to get to like the end of a project without sorting those foundational layers. So I think for us, you know, the one of those sort of three pillars is always the floor plan. Like until I've got the floor plan in my head, I just can't really get into it. I just don't have the house in my head. I need to be able to walk through each of the spaces and know where each piece of furniture, you know, and if we're doing a more sort of architectural interior package, then, you know, where the doors and everything is going to be as well. And then the sort of second part, I think, budget. Like just early on, we just do a sort of provisional budget, and we like to just agree something then and there before we kind of get too sort of far down a path that's not sort of, you know, correct in terms of, you know, the client's not going to get what they want, or, you know, we obviously don't want to sort of push something further than someone's comfortable with. So we just try and get that conversation out quite early on. And then obviously the mood boards as well as the third one. So I think once I know like the plan, approximately sort of how much we're going to be able to spend and what we all want it to look like, I think everything else just comes really smoothly.
Well, that's also very helpful to all of us watching, because you know these interiors are very, very individual, and they're all very special, but there is work that happens first, and so much structure and consideration behind it before things can look so special and so individual. We are coming to the end of our talk, and I would like to first encourage our audience to visit the Design Center in person for ideas, inspiration, and for very tactile shopping, because we do want to touch things and try things, and the showrooms are now open. And I would also like to invite all of you to check out our panelists on Instagram and to check out their websites, because this is meant as a little teaser so that you can get to know Sophie, Rose, and Tiffany, and then explore more, because they all have so much talent. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Rose. And thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Emilio. So nice to speak to you.
Gorgeous.
Bye.
Thank you.